to a game tonight in the Big 12. Another night where Jamie Dixon shows just how good Jamie Dixon is. Mike Miles goes for 19 points and 6 assists. And what was once a bubbly TCU Horned Frogs team is nowhere close to bubbly anymore. 2 top 10 wins in a row. TCU 74, Kansas 64. Arch, your reaction?
Jamie Dixon, he's one of the best coaches in America. To beat Texas Tech and Kansas in the back-to-back week kind of shows, number one, how good his team is, but two, what a great coach he is just in terms of their program. They're heading to the tournament. There's not even a bubble team. They're fighting right now to get as high as a seed as they possibly can. And they just threw a big monkey wrench into the Big 12 because knocking Kansas down a level puts Baylor right in position to win the Big 12 championship as well. And Texas Tech only being a game back, but I know there's still another round this weekend to get through. But TCU, you can give your cheers early for Jamie Dixon and the Horned Frogs right now. I mean, they have great point guard play, and Jamie's experience with USA basketball, taking Mikey with him and playing on that, I can't help to think that hadn't raised their level as a team, but they're playing defense like they normally do.
Yeah, you want a perspective about how good the Big 12 is. Talk about teams having to play all these quad 1 and quad 2 games, and they should be rewarded. In the Big 12 conference, TCU is 8th best on offense and the 5th best on defense. And yet they're clearly in the NCAA tournament. There's 7 teams better on offense and 4 better on defense, and what that tells me, you pick TCU up and you drop them in, for example, the Pac-12, or you drop them in these other conferences. I think what you would see is they're 19-9 right now. They'd be more like 22 or 23 wins at the moment. Yeah. I mean, they're a very good team. The other part, TCU, UConn about 2 weeks ago, I think was the number 1 or number 2 offensive rebounding team in America. Right now you look at Jamie Dixon, TCU, Jamie Dixon as the coach, they're the number 1 offensive rebounding team in America. And, it's like, if you have that strength, you could beat anybody on a given night, especially on a neutral court.
Let's talk about Kansas. DeJuan Harris goes scoreless in this game in 26 minutes. Remy Martin scores 2 points in the 12 minutes he played. Arch, how concerning is it that Kansas's point guard play is just average?
I mean, it's concerning when you look at Kansas's aspirations to go to a Final Four. I think they were probably hoping to get Remy up to speed here towards the end of the year after he sat a few. But like Sean said, it's late in the year and the Big 12 beats you up. I would not want to be TCU going to the Phog next week. I think Kansas will respond. But they were just at Baylor on Saturday, quick turnaround at TCU Tuesday. They have 2 home games to finish up the Big 12. I'm not concerned about Kansas at all. I think they're going to be right there for the 1 line, maybe the 2 line, depending on how things shake out in the next couple of weeks. But Kansas is a potential Final Four team when they're playing well.
I tell you what, though, Arch, guard play. We've talked about teams having not just 1 good point guard on the court, but sometimes 2, and how that is historically proven that those teams seem to advance deep in the NCAA tournament. Kansas's point guard play is a concern. I think Bill Self would tell you that. They've been able to play around it, overcome it. At times, those guys have really looked apart and played well. But just having, 1 and 2 of those guys on the court who are really good, consistent. You watch Baylor last night at Texas, and, Cryer and Akinjo out there together. Like, they just controlled the game, big game on the road late in February. You said it, Arch, everybody feels that grind, but why is it that Baylor left that game with the win? And I thought their guard play was the difference. And when you look at Kansas moving forward, they have so many good traits. I do think it's a concern. Like, we like Villanova. What's one of the reasons that we feel like Villanova is the real thing? It's because Colin Gillespie is a great point guard. Great. And he's old. He's a leader. He shows up in big games. Having those guards on your team playing well and having more than one of them, I think is almost a requirement.
Who's the team in the Big 12? And this is a hard thing to select, but I'll give you A, B, C. Okay? Who's the team in the Big 12 that if you had to back, you're backing here? A, Baylor, B, Texas Tech, or C, Kansas? And I ask the question knowing it's a very hard question to answer, but you get to back one of the three teams. Arch, you're up first. Who are you going with and why?
I'm backing Baylor, especially if they're at full strength at the guard play. If you put Akinju, Flagler, and Cryer on the floor throughout the course of a 40-minute game, those three guys are going to be really hard for the other team to deal with. They're great defensively. They're top 10 in both offense and defense. But to me, those three-headed monster at the guard, when they're healthy and their defense being as good as it is, them being able to weather the injuries that they have through the last 3 weeks, Baylor is the best team in the Big 12, and they're the most built and complete to win in the NCAA tournament compared to Kansas and Texas Tech, especially with the caveat of those three guards being ready to go.
You know, I think it's a remarkable story and one of the best storylines of college basketball this year. Scott Drew won a national championship and he lost a ton.
4 starters
from that team. And in that backcourt, you know, again, let's talk about Baylor's backcourt a year ago. To back up my point about the importance of point guard play or guard play, think about their team a year ago. But for them to reboot and do it like they've done it, we've talked about this, Arch. Jeremy Sokan and Kendall Brown, they don't look like freshmen to me. You know, they're very unselfish with their style. They are elite on defense. Usually, even the best of the best who are freshmen struggle more on defense than they do on offense. And I think one of the secrets to Baylor's success this year is those two guys, they've plugged them in and they're like their two best defenders, right? I mean, they can push it in transition. They make big plays. They give them that versatility. And right now with their latest injury, Big John going down, and those two guys being on the court more together, you can see they're getting more confident. They're improving. And that's the one thing that's dangerous about these elite freshmen. They don't stop getting better. Their ceiling is so high. And I like Baylor for that reason. And I don't know the answer, but if Flagler returns, I mean, he was their leading scorer.
Cryer.
I'm sorry.
LJ Cryer.
LJ Cryer. Out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I messed that, but when you look at Cryer, he was their leading scorer. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, you are.
They lost their leading scorer and they're still playing the way they are, but I don't know if Cryer's coming back. If he does come back, I agree with you, Arch. I mean, you talk about 1 seed, you talk about a team that can do it again. I mean, I believe that. And also, as I've watched James Akinjo, you know, it's not as easy to transfer and be steady and be great from the first game all the way to the last game as if you've been in Baylor's program for 4 years. It just doesn't work that way. I don't care how talented you are or what program you left to come from. It takes a little bit of time. But just watching James here in the last couple of weeks, now that his back injury is behind him, I feel like he's playing like their brand of basketball. Seems like he's fitting in more and more. When he's passing that ball and he thinks pass and he's defending like Baylor does, I think that brings out the best in their team. And I was really watching that Texas Baylor game last night. I was impressed with both teams, but Baylor leaving that game with the win is super impressive.
It is. And I asked that question of who do you back the most? And I think we'd be remiss to not bring up before we go to break the team that's number 2 in Ken Pom defense in the country, one of the best defensive teams on their best day, maybe the best defensive team in college basketball. And that's Texas Tech.
Yeah.
That's Texas Tech. Now, you could say Bryson Williams and Davion Warren, that offensively they can come and go because they're not a top 30 offensive team in the sport. What do you make of the Red Raiders? I mean, what can they be a team in your mind? Do you have them on New Orleans level, or do you think just short?
I think the
I think you
balance
have
of
to put
Baylor,
them.
the balance of Baylor
Yeah.
though, Arch, I mean, talk about a two-way team. They're 8 on offense, 10 on defense. I mean, it's been that way from November. They've had guys get injured. They've had guys, in and out of the lineup. They have not been healthy all year. There are some teams that they're having a magical season and you look at it and say, I don't think one player's missed a game. And you look at Baylor and think about what they've overcome to still be that team that can beat you with their defense and their offense. I think that's a big difference comparing them to Texas Tech.
Yeah, Texas Tech is going to be an absolute bear for anybody they play against because of their competitiveness, their toughness, and their defense. But when you look at Texas Tech in the NCAA tournament, they're 290 in the country in three-point field goal percentage offense. 290. They don't shoot the ball particularly well as a group. It's not their thing shooting the three. Their defense has to be unstoppable at times against the other teams that when you're playing the best of the best, you have to be able to score. And I think they've done a good job this year of maneuvering guys around. They've developed a way of playing on offense. They're good enough to beat anybody. But when you're 290 in three-point field goal percentage offense in the NCAA tournament, at some point, you're going to have to shoot it at a high clip. I just don't know if Texas Tech does that long term, but if Texas Tech, New Orleans good, can they win 4 games? They've won 4 games in a row in the Big 12. That means they can win 4 games in a row in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. And look, Ken Pomeroy is one of the most talented people in sports. Jeff Goodman can take his JG1 and flush it in the Atlantic Ocean. It's not even close. It's like the highest level versus an elementary level in terms of sophistication. And he said something on Arch and I's podcast, and I'll never forget how he said it and why. He backed it up with data. Great offense in March beats great defense.
Yeah.